When it comes to knife combatives and doing videos on knife combatives, people get a little reactionary towards seeing me working on my training dummy with an edged weapon or working to use edged weapons. And it's understandable because when you see me doing those kinds of things, it does look horrible and it does look violent. And if you picture what I'm training to do to another human being, I can see the reaction and I understand it. But one thing that a lot of people don't understand is that most of us in this kind of training, who do this kind of training, have a much deeper understanding of use of force law and the ideals of what is reasonable force. Most of us who train in this have an ability to scale our use of force. We don't just do knife combatives. This kind of bag work is what I spend most of my time on. Actually, mainly this preemptive striking with the dummy and going from a fence into an aggressive gross mortar combination kind of blitz is what I like to spend a lot of my time training. I also train pugilism. I do a lot of knife sparring, a lot of different kinds of sparring, slap sparring, and occasional dirty boxing with my Muay Thai students. I'm an older man, well, not super old. I'll be 60 on my next birthday. So I try to keep my sparring very controlled and light because of the dangers that as you age as a man, and I've said this before in videos, the danger of a brain bleed is real for us older folks. But I also train how to use knives in a worst case scenario, but it doesn't have to be a knife. I train to be able to use other weapons, other force multipliers, as well as edged weapons. But this is far from the only thing that I train, even though this is what I show on my YouTube and my Instagram a lot. But that is because I am trying to promote things like the Medusa edged weapon system. But it is not all that I do. And I am capable of scaling my use of force to a reasonable use of force to the situation. Now, I know that I have to tell people every time I show myself using force or training to use force that if I could run, I would run. I would always take the better part of valor and remove myself from the situation rather than do something like what I'm training for here. This would be the absolute last case scenario. And quite honestly, when people who are not in the know, who don't train combatives, see people doing this, I imagine it looks psychotic. I imagine it looks horrible. Please understand that I would never want to pull an edged weapon out in a use of force scenario, because I know that regardless of what the reasonable force is, I would have to go through costly court procedures at the very least. And there's a very good chance that if I made even a little bit of an error in judgment, that I would be going to jail. So if you're going to train edged weapons or anything like that, or if you're in a place that allows for firearms, if you're going to train firearms, do yourself a favor and research what your legal rights are for self-defense in the area that you live, and then base your training around that. If you do not do that and get lazy with using and training with edged weapons, you will get yourself into trouble for sure. But if you ever have to use the worst case level of violence, you probably will be in trouble anyway. Now, I want you to look at that. This is why a fixed blade is better. That one time, the wave failed on my knife and I didn't open it all the way, And with a folder, even with that wave feature, that's a good possibility that your folder will not open properly. So if you go straight into a stab, and if I had stabbed my dummy, I would have had a catastrophic failure there. This is why for combative uses, small pocket carry fixed blades are better than folders tactically. However, a folder is much more socially acceptable when it is sitting on your pocket rather than a fixed blade. The knife systems, the tactics I'm using, are mainly from the Medusa edged weapon system as well as the Western Piper method, but there is a little bit of influence from Libra in here, from some material I purchased from Scott Babb. And everything I do is influenced by Eskrima and Thai boxing because those are my main martial bases. A system like Medusa is not a martial art. What it is a set of tactics. And I believe if you're gonna practice knife combatives, Medusa should be your base because it's very realistic. And you practice to access the weapon after using some very violent use of force, and then going to your weapon and continuing with stabbing in the worst case scenario. But the beauty of Medusa is, and this is why I am using it as my base for all my knife combatives, the beauty of Medusa is, A, like I said, you're not holding your knife in your hand already, or your weapon, and B, it is very adaptable. I've said this in many videos. The Medusa formula is shock, latch, and stab at its core. However, you can just shock. If I shock, that means attack preemptively with enough force to cause shock and injury. So if I shock like what you see me doing here, and that person, if I was doing it on a real person and they went down, the stab would never happen. The latch would never happen. Shock and run, shock and throw, shock and grapple, shock and put the person into a submission. All of these and so much more are possible off of shock. And if you shock effectively and can get to safety, then that's what you must do. You are not there to defeat or hurt someone. You are fighting back to get to safety, or helping someone in your care to get to safety. Now, if you like videos like this and want to learn more about these kinds of fighting disciplines, please support my Patreon. The link is in the description. I really hope you enjoyed this video on my personal philosophy when it comes to the ugly world of knife combatives.